What if the challenge or obstacle in front of you isn't proof that you're failing or a message that you should stop, but actually a doorway asking if you're really ready to do what it takes to have the life that you want?
I'm Eric Orton.
I'm Emily Orton.
And in 2014, we bootstrapped a year on a fixer-upper sailboat with our 5 kids. We wrote a book about it called 7 at Sea, and that book became a New York Times top 10 travel book.
On this podcast, we explore adventure, connection, and stepping into a more intentional life. And we don't just talk about it, we practice it. We invite you to join us on playful, guided sailing trips around the world.
And if you stick around to the end of this episode, you'll hear our sailing update where we share where we're going, when, and which trips still have space. And you can hear our sailing takeaway where you'll hear from somebody who's actually come on a sailing trip with us already.
Let's dive in. You know, in life we have all kinds of shifts. There are kids leaving, retirement, reinvention, health changes, whatever's happening in the news, divorce, remarriage, selling a business, and any number of things that might cause you to ask, like, who am I now? And you decide that you want to act, you want to take a step, you want to go in a new direction. And then suddenly things get messy and maybe you're tired, maybe it's more expensive than you thought, maybe you have realized you don't have as much information as you wish you did, and you get a little wobbly in your confidence, and it just kind of feels like safer to stay put, stay where you are. And you know, it's funny how that happens. As we get close to something that we actually want, all these obstacles can come up, and a lot of people read that as a stop sign. And we like to refer back to something called the hero's journey. This shows up in every story, every movie, and we think it shows up in our lives as well. And it's when the ordinary person hears the call or wants to move towards something more, and then they meet a test. And that test is separating, that's like an obstacle. Sometimes it's a troll at the bridge, and it's kind of just helping you determine whether this is something that you really want, that you're willing to fight for, or if you're going to turn around and go home and sit on your couch. So we have an element of this in the Navigator framework that we teach is kind of our sailing-based life coaching framework. And it's actually literally just what we use as we go through life on our own. And we made it official and codified it and created a program around it,
And trademarked it.
But this makes me think of a part of our framework called Trust Your Compass.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to pass it over to you to maybe pick up on that or any other thoughts you have around it.
Well,
just trying to set the stage of like, what are these obstacles that we're talking about?
yeah, and I think, as we've thought about it and talked about it for a number of years, there's always a kind of a balance between, I don't want to just keep going in a fruitless cause, banging my head against the wall. And so have I learned enough to know that this is a dead end and I should quit? Or is this just an opportunity to persevere and overcome obstacles to gain what I'm truly seeking? Both are real. Sometimes it's important to quit.
Yes.
Like to not be blind to reality. I mean, I would see this all the time in New York. Everybody that moves there to make it as an actor or an artist or a designer, this is like the daily question. How long do I persist in trying to break through in the art or the industry that I want to be a part of? Or is this a fruitless cause, and am I just wasting my life? I mean, that is, and I think artists suffer from this the most.
Maybe. It's definitely the world we were most familiar with.
Yeah, I guess that's just where I have seen it, because that's where kind of the space that we lived in. Because I think here is my favorite example of this principle in action. Our daughter Allison, from a very young age, fell in love with the Japanese language, the Japanese culture. We had some friends at church and in our neighborhood that were from Japan. And I was visiting their home, and Allison was with me. And the wife could tell that Allison was just soaking in all the books on the shelves and everything. And finally she said, "Do you want me to teach you Japanese?" And Allison just lit up. And she said, "Yes." And, we were homeschooling at this point. And so Allison was able to just have one-on-one lessons and learn Japanese from a very patient teacher. And it was hard. And lots of people would talk about how difficult it is to learn Japanese.
Don't you know it's one of the hardest languages to learn? It's like the top 3 hardest languages to learn. Yeah, they would say things like that. Doesn't you know that's a hard language?
I wouldn't know. I've never tried to learn Japanese, but I believe them. And she would just say, well, they must not love it as much as I do. And so I think that that is actually a really good indicator, because Allison, now her and her Japanese husband and their Japanese son had just moved to Tokyo. And so to look back on the past 10 years, to go from, do you want me to teach you Japanese, to fully raising a son in Japan, living 100% Japanese life, that's what I call an immersion program. And I guess
she didn't see the obstacle as an obstacle.
Yeah. And I think maybe that's a good indicator for our heart, is if the obstacles are going to feel hard no matter what. They're going to feel hard. But is there a desire to get to the other side of it? Is there a continual draw to what is on the other side of it? And if that remains consistent, if that remains in place, then the obstacle needs to be overcome. But if you're like, I actually don't really care. If I get past this, I'm not really interested in what's on the other side anymore, or it's not worth it to me. I think that's also helpful. And I'm going through this right now in some music areas of my life. And I'm not going to get specific, but just I don't know that it's worth it to do this musical thing, because even if I get to the other side of it, I don't know that it's what I want. And so it might be time to choose a different island, so to speak.
Shift gears, yeah.
Shift gears. Anyway,
well, I think you're a great example of this because very often you will say, I've learned everything I want to know about that. You'll pursue an avenue, you'll be excited, you'll put in the work, the effort, you'll hit some level of achievement, and then you're like, I kind of feel like I've got a handle on this, I've figured it out, and I don't want to spend the rest of my life doing that. There's other things I'm interested in. I'm now gonna, go in a different direction. And that's a perfectly acceptable, your heart doesn't feel like, oh, I quit, I gave up, I didn't give it my all. You come to this place where you just realize, I have scratched that itch and now I'm moving on.
I'm smiling because I can remember we may not even have been married yet, but when we were either dating, and that sort of anyway, just that time, very, very early on, I could almost not sleep. I was so consumed in my mind with how to create a musical.
You thought I was going to say who was thinking about me, right? That was kind of the setup. But
sorry.
The truth is, the main thing on his mind was, how do I write and produce a musical that felt like such a big, hairy, audacious goal with so many moving parts to wrangle? And yes.
I was like, who can I talk to? What books can I find? What rooms do I need to get in to learn and figure this out? But I genuinely had a hard time sleeping. My mind would just work so much on this problem. And now I've written and produced enough musicals that I feel like you said,
I get it.
I could write another musical. It's not like I wouldn't ever want to do that, but it's a puzzle that I know how to solve. And sometimes it's a lot of work. I don't know if I want to do that much work anymore.
I remember moving into this house, and it's a historic home, and our neighbor also lives in a historic home, and he's already done all the work on his house, and we started going to work and kind of was letting us know, once you've done one historic home, you're pretty good.
You're hey, I don't
for
need
the rest of your life.
Happy to buy a new build, happy to rent somewhere.
And we poured a lot of energy into it, and there's still things that we want to do, but it was definitely, we got to that place where it was I want to own this house rather than this house owning me. Getting tired. And it's to the point that I'm good. I'm satisfied. We don't have to do a complete gut renovation. Let's just live in this place. So that's an example of it.
So I'm curious if we can come up with an example of when either us or somebody we know has kind of said, hey, I've come up against some opposition and I've decided I want to bail. I mean, because I think we can think of people that have bailed and we're kind of they gave up so easily. They probably weren't.
They were probably so close. It probably wasn't as hard as they thought it was going to be.
And they missed out. And then this time I was that's a good call. Yeah, you're leaning your ladder against the wrong tree here.
Yeah.
You're actually climbing the wrong ladder versus if you just climbed to the top, you would have had the best view. You would have gotten the view that you wanted. And maybe that's the metaphor for it.
Well, I think of one of the primary stories that we tell when we talk about Trust Your Compass was from an actual sailing experience that we had with our friends. We were living on a sailboat with our 5 children, which we did for most of the year of 2014, and it changed our lives. And this was one of those life lessons that we got from that experience, that we were sailing with 3 other families on 3 different boats, and we were all going from point A to point B, get there in your own fashion. And I think we started out ahead.
We were the first to pull anchor.
We were the first to leave,
and we were ahead, yeah.
And we were heading out, and we had navigation tools, but it looked like on the track we were on that we were actually going to run into the end of the island or something.
Yeah, there's a peninsula that came out.
A little peninsula. And so Eric, given this information, bumped us out a few degrees so that we would avoid hitting this island. And then even though we had started out ahead and we all had the same wind, we got in last. And we saw the other boats as they came behind us. They did not shift course and they did not run into the island. But we had shifted course and we were now having to zigzag back, and cover more distance, which is why we got to the anchorage last that day. And maybe you can share your conversation with John. I don't want to speak for you when you're sitting right here.
Just to double back on what you're saying is I was, we did the whole trip navigating off of an iPad. So our navigation system was pretty rudimentary, and I was really navigating by sight. I could see the island. I was like, oh yeah, if we keep going, we're going to hit the peninsula. So I'm just going to bump us out 5 degrees. And I adjusted. And then John and Peter, who were the captains on the other 2 boats, they did not. And I was like, they'll wake up and come around. They'll see that I'm right, and they'll eventually adjust. Turns out, obviously, I was wrong. And I got in. We were, we barely made it into anchor before sunset. And we went over to their boat and we were talking. And John was like, what happened? I saw you adjust course out there. And I explained that it looked like we were going to hit the point of the island. And so I adjusted. And he's like, oh yeah, sometimes you just got to trust your compass, because what you're looking at it can actually deceive your eyes. And I was like, oh. So I just perceived that we were going to run into the end of the island. But in actuality, if I looked at the compass, we weren't going to. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes what we perceive as the risk factor or the obstacle actually is no obstacle at all, or actually is not a risk. We just sort of...
It looks scary.
We attune ourselves to it, or we look for reasons why something is going to go wrong, or we just expect something to ruin it. And so anyway, yeah. But if we can just trust our compass, we'll get to where we're going in the most efficient way possible, and we don't have to change course. We can just head straight for our goal.
Yeah, and we don't advocate just being silly, like you said earlier, like stubbornly move forward for something just because you said you were going to do that. And we had that happen once. One of our daughters said, one kid said to the other kid, if you do this, then I'm going to run away. And then that thing happened. And so she's like, well, I have to do what I said I would do. And she didn't want to.
She didn't want to run away.
She didn't want to. She didn't like it when she did it, but she kind of felt like, if I'm a person of integrity, I have to do what I said I was going to do. And so she just did the thing. Even it was said in an impulsive manner instead of reevaluating. She's like, well, I said I would do it, so I guess I better have to do it now. And that was been a good lesson for us, both of those lessons. Sometimes it's hard to know, what is the difference between, am I seeing this obstacle through the lens of fear and just backing down because I'm afraid to receive what's on the other side, or I'm afraid of the amount of work it's going to take to receive what's on the other side of this obstacle, or am I afraid of how much I'm going to have to change as a person for what's on the other side of this obstacle, or what I'm going to have to give up in my life to become or experience this new thing. And other times you might be getting new quality information. It's not coming from a place of fear, but it's informing you that this is not the right timing, or this is not the right direction. So fear, some ways to tell, let's talk about ways to tell whether it's fear or new information that's causing you to shift course, right? Mm-hmm. Fear things might be like, what will other people think? I'm too old for this. This will be uncomfortable. And if it's new information, for example, is this is now dangerous. I think one of our favorite examples was just one of those initial SpaceX launches that we were sitting there, we were getting ready to watch the launch, they were counting down, and the weather conditions were shifting. And so 6 minutes before the launch, they called it off. And that does not mean they scrapped the entire program. It doesn't even mean they scrapped that launch. It just means that they pushed it off to another day.
They hit the pause button.
Mm-hmm. They hit the pause button. And I also think the information you talked about of realizing, you know what, I'm actually really satisfied with how far I've come with this, and there are other things I'd like to explore.
Well, to continue on with the SpaceX thing, the launch happened the next day.
Yeah.
They just needed certain weather conditions, certain humidity levels or whatever, low wind, and they got it the next day and it went. But if they had just tried to sort of pig-headedly say, hey, we're going to go no matter what because we're committed, we're going to determine we're going to overcome all obstacles.
The people from YouTube are here.
Yeah.
We have to go.
Sometimes we can give in to external pressures, and that may not be the best way to do it. But as long as we're kind of being true to our compass, we can go. We'll know when the time is right. We can still go, still do the thing.
Absolutely. So let's see. I have one more sailing metaphor. Sometimes you might pick a destination and you'll get on your boat and you'll head out like you're going to be going to your destination and everything's going great. And then the wind shifts, water starts slapping the hull of your boat. Things are kind of shaking around. This is not what you expected. Does this mean you're now going to turn around, or do you keep going forward? What are the options that you see there? Because there's a multitude.
I have a very specific example.
Yeah, let's go.
So last year I was sailing in the Virgin Islands with a group, and we were going to Anegada. Anegada is the one island that you sail towards, and you can't see it when you leave. When you head out for it, it's far enough over the horizon and flat enough that you can't see it. I've been there enough times that I trust and I know it's there. But we're going, and the winds were really light that day. And and so the boat was kind of clanging around. It was rocking left to right. And I said to the group, I was like, we can go to Anegada and we'll get there. It's going to be slow and a little bit tedious and not that fun of a sail. Or we can turn and have the wind right behind us at a better, more comfortable angle, and we could sail to this really cool place that I've wanted to check out called White Bay on Great Camino, I think is where it's at. And they're like, that sounds good. And so we decided to not sail to Anegada, and we sailed to White Bay. And not because we gave up on Anegada, but what we really wanted to have that day was a nice sail.
Yeah.
We weren't, the destination wasn't the end all be all. It was, how do we want to get there? What kind of a day do we want to have? And we wanted to have a nice downwind sail instead of a slow cross upwind sail. So we changed directions. We reset the sails. The boat was moving quickly. The air was fresh, and we just had a really nice couple of hours of sailing. We got to the place, and I was like, all right, I like it. And so you might just say, well, you know what? I actually don't really care what job I do. I just want to work in this way on a daily rhythm. The specific company that you work for or whatever role you have may not matter, but you might want to have a specific kind of day. And that's also totally legit. It doesn't mean you're a quitter. I think it means you know what you want.
Yeah, I think it's really important to figure out what it is that you want and what is worth it to go through those obstacles, so that when those obstacles arise, you can really determine whether the message for you is, I've come as far as I want to go with this, or whether the message is, I'm willing to level up to move past these obstacles because I really want what's on the other side of this. I think that's actually a really good question. So maybe that's a way for you to reflect. If you're facing obstacles, you can say, like, how much do I want what's on the other side of this? And we have this quote that is like, it's not what heroes achieve that defines them as heroes. It's what they're willing to overcome to get there. And sometimes that's going to mean doing some big, great thing that's really hard and makes you stretch and sweat. And sometimes the big, hard thing is going to be slowing down, switching directions, getting even more clear about what you want at this season in your life. And that can be uncomfortable when you've had a lot of momentum going one direction and say, like, you know what, this is actually working, but it's not what I want anymore. So once again, as usual, we come on here to have these conversations and share our insights, and I never know exactly where it's going to go or where it's going to end, but hopefully it's something that is useful to you to reflect. And our hope is that you can, live more boldly. And by that, we really mean being intentional, which requires looking at what's happening in your life and seeing what you really think of it, how you want to proceed. Until next time.
What could go right? Before we wrap up, I just want to share the sailing update in case you're interested in coming sailing with us. We have a fun plot twist. We are actually looking to open up a last minute trip to Bora Bora. That's in French Polynesia, down by Tahiti. We'll actually start in an island called Raiatea, which is just next to Tahiti, and then we'll sail one way over to Bora Bora. So we'll be flying home out of Bora Bora. That is going to be May 2nd through the 9th. So if you're interested, we do have to make sure that it's a full boat for that trip to come together. And there's a few people that have already expressed interest. But if you want to go to Bora Bora soon, May 2nd through 9th, down in French Polynesia. Then June, July, August are all sold out with our Mediterranean trips. We do have space on our September Norway trip. September 3rd through the 9th, we have room for up to 4 people, 2 cabins. So if you want to join us in Norway, we're going to be sailing the beautiful Lofoten Islands. I am personally super excited about that. And then our September Italy trip is sold out, but Mexico in October 5 through 10, we have a spot for 1 solo female traveler, Mexico 5 through 10 in October. And then in the Bahamas, 9 through the 14th, we have room for 1 solo female traveler. Otherwise, those trips are also sold out. In December, 7th through the 12th, we're going back to the Virgin Islands and we have room for up to 5 people, 2 cabins and 1 solo male traveler. That's December of this year. And we're starting to piece together our 2027. And what we know so far is that in March 1st through the 6th, we're going to be back in the Bahamas. And so we have more cabins and space available if you want to hit us up for the Bahamas next year, March of 2027. And that is the sailing update.
We can talk about trips all day, but it's more fun to hear from someone who's been aboard. Here's a recent guest takeaway.
I think my thing that I was the most worried about was going with new people. Although I can go up to anybody and talk to them, I was just worried about being around all new people. Takeaway, patience from you. Very much how you teach people and everything. I like that. And just, by the 3rd day, I felt like family. So that was like a hug. And what I would tell people is it goes right and try it again.
What could go right? Awesome. Thank you.